So many people will say, if you are trying to debut as a K-pop group and you are not part of the big four, you are absolutely screwed. But the big four used to be the big three. So does that mean anything is possible? What if your 3-year-old song goes viral out of the blue? Are those examples just super lucky once in a lifetime flukes? Or does hard work and perseverance truly get you nothing unless you have $1 billion company backing you? Now, I think we already know the answer to that, but regardless, welcome to today's episode of Kpop Cancelled. My name is Angelina, and you're watching an episode of Kpop Cancelled. Yes, we already went through that. Last episode actually has like 20,000 views. I was like, holy cannoli, holy crap. So thank you so much for supporting this podcast. And stick around if you'd like to discuss the big four companies, K-pop group Nepotism, and how Nugus groups are really struggling. But have they always been struggling? We'll discuss it, don't worry. Okay, so this episode was actually inspired by Halsey. I don't know if you've seen this post going around of Halsey talking about how she's no longer allowed. Like, her label said she is not allowed to release an album anymore. So this was, of course, part of a greater interview, but let me tell you what she said specifically and the context behind it. Now, The Great Impersonator was the last album that she released, and apparently it didn't perform commercially well, despite the fact that it peaked at number 2 like most other Halsey albums. Though it has not been certified platinum or even gold, only one of the singles even made it onto the Hot 100. The number Oh my gosh, what is with this thumbs up animation again? The number 88 peaking Lucky. According to Halsey, this has left her in a state of music industry paralysis. So she did an interview with Zane Lowe where they talk about her career. He tells her, "You're a career artist, Ashley," and she responds, "If I get to be," and he responds, "Who's stopping you?" To which she says, "I can't make an album right now. I can't make an album right now. I'm not allowed to. I can't make an album right now." With Lowe saying, "I don't like the sound of that." And then Halsey says it's the reality because The Great Impersonator didn't perform the way they thought it was going to. And this is despite the fact that the album sold 100,000 copies in the first week. To which she says, "And if I'm being honest with you, the album sold 100,000 effing copies the first week. That's a lot of copies, especially for an artist who hasn't had a hit in a long time. But they want manic numbers from me." Manic is the name of one of her albums. But she says, "I can't do that every single time. It should be good enough that I do it once in a while, but it's not. It's not." And what would be considered a success for most artists? A success story, 100,000 albums first week. In an era when we don't sell physical music? Okay, with no radio hit, nothing, but it's a failure in the context of the kind of success that I've had previously. So in theory, 100,000 copies in the first week is good, right? It's a pretty high number, but if her label is comparing it to her previous success or previous successes, then it's really not that great to them. Quote, "And that's the hardest part, I think, of having been a pop star once, is because I'm not anymore. But I've been compared to numbers and to people I don't consider lateral to me. You know what I mean? I mean, a couple years ago, yeah, it was me and Ariana quote unquote fighting for number 1 on the Billboard chart, and we weren't fighting, we were texting, we loved it. It was like the best time ever, that era. The Without Me, Thank You Next, Seven Rings era, that was amazing. It was an amazing time. But if my record comes out and sells 100,000 copies first week with no radio play, no real support, and the comparison is, well, why isn't she doing Taylor Swift numbers? Are you effing kidding me? I made an experimental concept album about how I almost effing died. I'm not going to do those numbers, but I'm doing pretty damn good. Those are strong numbers. I'm still in the top 10 of female artists first weeks, but it's not good. Even because it's not, the pop star I once was, even though I'm actively making the choice not to be." So with this, a lot of people started talking about K-pop. How do K-pop artists survive if they can't keep up with their previous numbers? And is that the reason why so many groups are disbanding? Because they can't keep up with their previous numbers, and their previous numbers might be numbers that are pretty good, but if you had a huge hit and then your next song is not as big of a hit but still pretty good hit, is the company going to take into consideration that the numbers are good or not good enough? And especially for artists who aren't part of the big four, what are they going to do? So let's take a minute to talk about what the big four is. I feel like most things in K-pop, if you're a K-pop stan, you like the weirdest things are very contentious, but this is a contentious issue in K-pop. The big four. Is it the big four? Or is it the big three? It used to be the big three, which included JYP Entertainment, SM Entertainment, and YG Entertainment. They were the three biggest labels in Korea. And it was the big three. But now it's the big four. And some people feel as though it should remain the big three. You can't just change the big three to the big four because a big, bold company came and inhaled so many other companies. But some would argue that you actually can. Because it really felt like out of nowhere, BTS blew up, right? I feel like a lot of people can attest to that. And they were under a company called Big Hit Entertainment. But Big Hit technically isn't, well, they're part of the big four in that HYBE is an umbrella label that has Big Hit, but you know, they're not the fourth one, if that makes sense. But HYBE didn't always exist, so it kind of is Big Hit. HYBE is new, is all I'm saying. HYBE is a new big label, and it used to be just Big Hit. And HYBE since then has engulfed so many other K-pop labels like Pledis Entertainment, home of 17, Source Music, which was home to G-Friend. I don't know the status of them as of right now. They created their own sub-labels as well. I believe Belift Lab and even famously Adore. I mean, all that to say, I think it's safe to say the big four, but I'm totally excited to have us fight in the comments about this. But I always remember this being a conversation. Of course, if you debut under YG Entertainment, you of course have an advantage because of all the YG artists that debuted before you. Same goes for SM. Like, you get the gist, right? It's kind of like nepotism groups. Before you even debut, you already have all these fans that are willing to support you because they already like the other groups that the company has. Now, sometimes it takes like years and years and years for a company to debut in another group. And by that time, I'm not sure if the support has died down. If we think of Blackpink, I mean, between 21 and Blackpink, there was a 7-year gap. I remember when Blackpink debuted, or at least in their Netflix documentary, they're like, this has been 7 years since YG debuted in a girl group. But I also remember NMIXX. Before NMIXX even debuted, JYP Entertainment was selling their albums. Like, you didn't even know who was in this group, what the songs would sound like, and people were literally buying their albums. It was like a special thing. And then recently, All Day Project, even though they're under the Black label, the Black label still seemingly has ties to YG Entertainment. So they're like almost like a YG group. And people were saying like KARD was another co-ed group. People were like, KARD has been around for so many years and All Day Project did it in like a couple days. And they were super successful. And a lot of people attributed it to the company that they were in. And I guess there's also this sense of camaraderie between the groups. If you like Twice, then JYP debuts a new girl group, you're gonna feel a certain connection to them. So NMIXX being Twice's kind of sister group, kind of. Like, it's certainly an advantage. You can't deny the fact that it's an advantage because debuting is hard and expensive. And if you don't have the funds, what are you gonna do about it? We already know that idols debut with so much debt because of this reason. And sometimes maybe you do have the budget, but you don't have the connections, which actually brings me to the group VVS. VVS are a K-pop group under a small company, and they recently released a podcast episode where they talked about why the group didn't perform on music shows for their debut. So the CEO basically said, the CEO was on the podcast with them talking about this, and he said that they were disappointed, that they really wanted to show the fans. And one of the members said, it wasn't like we couldn't get on the show, we decided not to get on the show. And another member actually says there's so many ways to be on the internet. If you think of all these different social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, which is very true. There are plenty of ways to be on the internet. Music shows aren't the only way, but they're definitely a very good way to promote your group. Because people love music shows. People tune into music shows to see the outfits, to see the performance. But if nobody knows who you are they going to tune in? Is it worth the investment if at the end of the day, maybe not a lot of people are going to be tuning in? And that's exactly what they address. The CEO says that their original plan was to perform on a music show for their debut. But the issue was that they were completely unknown. Nobody knew who VVS was. And he even adds this very interesting bit of information that you have to pay for every set at a music show, which is $20,000 to $30,000. And you basically only use these sets once. And if you go to the main 6 music shows, it adds up to around $100,000. So if you're a small company and this group is debuting out of nowhere, is that really a smart investment to make? Because yeah, some music shows go viral, some fan cams go viral. But could we argue those are from more known groups? So his idea was that they were going to gain a little bit of a fandom first. They were going to get a little bit more well-known before going on a music show. So they decided not to go on music shows for the first song, but then they were hoping for the second song that they could. He said something about an SM Entertainment investment, but that ended up falling through. So they just didn't end up going at all. He also says that they decided to save that money to make different content instead, which is something I've been talking about for a long time now. You know, we see a lot less idols on variety shows because these idols can take the control into their own hands. The companies can take the control into their own hands and make their own content. You can make your own dance videos. You can do whatever you want. You can make your own shows if you wanted to and host it on your own channels if you wanted to. And then there's no discussion of, you know, who gets what percentage, because if you go on a variety show, I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that, if the variety show even wants to host you. But with people's own social media, it's a lot more freeing, I guess. Like one of the members was saying, there are so many ways to be on the internet these days. But it definitely made me ponder a lot because, yeah, if you're going to spend $100,000 to go on music shows, nobody knows who you are. Of course, there's always going to be some pre-debut fans for anyone, really. But, you know, let's say you have 100 pre-debut fans and there's 100 people watching that music show. Was that worth the $20,000 to $30,000? I think absolutely not. Even if 5,000 people end up watching the video, it still doesn't contribute. No, it doesn't like equal to $20,000, $30,000. And if it was 5,000 views for 6 videos, you go on 6 music shows, that's still not worth $100,000. So investment wise, I think it makes a lot of sense actually, unless they were debuting under SM Entertainment, where there was already that buzz because they're from SM Entertainment, then it just doesn't make sense. Because like we were discussing earlier, if you're really lucky, it'll go viral, but that's never a given. That's never a promise. Though VBS were a little lucky in that aspect because some of their lyrics were actually going viral. I don't know if you've ever heard, I got the curves of the Barbie anatomy and y'all bitches mad at me. So those are one of their lyrics that even I've heard of. And there was another one, something like riding presidential in the backseat asleep like Biden or something like that. Let me check to make sure. Yeah, I'm moving presidential in the ride. Asleep in the back got me feeling like Biden. I remember that being a whole conversation. So if you're lucky, you can go viral in those types of ways. But of course, again, that's never a guarantee. And in fact, I have a couple examples of groups that randomly went viral in ways that nobody could have ever expected. Brave Girls, their song Rollin' came out in 2017. 4 years later in 2021, it randomly goes viral. I believe the girls were already moving out of their dorm, like they're on the brink of disbandment when this miracle happened to them. We all remember, right? Roll it, roll it. Such a fun summer song, like 4 years after the fact. How random is that? But it helped their careers. I mean, they didn't disband. I mean, I believe they ended up leaving their company anyways and now they're BB Girls, but still, like, it helped extend their career past what it was going to be. And then we have 50-50 with Cupid. Cupid went mega viral out of nowhere, and I don't think anyone anticipated the level of fame that song reached. But then there was a lot of turmoil. Some members left, tried to sue the company. One member stayed behind, and now there's a whole new group associated with them. But it also really depends, right? Because if you go super viral and then something happens, sometimes you're able to really ride that wave and continue a really successful career, but sometimes things get in the way and then nobody really cares anymore. And that's the sad thing, but it's a very real thing as well. I mean, if Halsey is talking about how her numbers aren't the same as they used to be and how her company won't let her release an album because of that, I mean, can you imagine for K-pop? I came across a couple Reddit posts, so let me read some to you. It's wild how cutthroat the K-pop industry is. This is a well-known fact, but since most fans focus on the big groups, it's easy to overlook. Since the start of this decade, over 200 girl groups have debuted, but how many have actually found decent success? Maybe a tenth of that? It's wild when you really think about it. The K-pop scene right now is basically this. Debut under the big 4? Congrats, that's your golden ticket. Debut under a small company, like the other 90% of idols, better get friendly with Taicha, the goddess of fortune, because you're going to need all the luck you can get. So one of the comments reads, I mean, the entertainment industry is absolutely cutthroat. However, in the K-pop industry, you get a very tangible view of what your options are. Getting into a big four company is great because if you debut, you're guaranteed success. And if you don't, it increases your chances of debuting at another company. But you can also spend a lot of time training for nothing. If you debut with a mid-tier company, your chances of having a livable wage is higher, but finding massive success or a long-lasting career in the industry is more slim. You can also almost pinpoint the exact age when you are definitely too old to debut. So while it's cutthroat and brutal, you do have a more realistic look at what your chances actually are. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is in the eye of the beholder, to be honest. That's something that definitely hurts my heart so much, right? Because, when you watch survival shows or anything of the sort, you see how, of course, everybody wants to debut, and I would love for everyone to debut. And not even just survival. I actually don't watch survival shows, but just the thought of them, right? But when you hear trainees' stories, I trained at this company for like 5 years and I didn't get to debut. I went to another company and that didn't work. And it's like, I know that's what it is. That's the reality of things, but it breaks my heart because, that person is left with so many what ifs. What if I could have debuted here? What if I could have done that? And I get it. Like, you don't go into that industry without, like, hopefully the strength to deal with that. But it also makes me sad that you could put your everything into something. Maybe you're even quitting school. Maybe even like all your backup plans are completely ruined and you can get dropped at any point along the way. And we've seen people getting dropped from their groups years into it as well. That is life, I understand, but it still makes me sad. So cutthroat indeed that many great and talented groups didn't make it and have disbanded quietly. But on the other hand, it's not cutthroat anymore once people get invested in a group. They will defend their group against over-exaggerated hate train comments when people simply criticize groups that can't sing or have lackluster performances. The quietly disbanding thing, I remember the group Chocolat. I remember we talked about Melanie in the last video. Now we're talking about the group as a whole. I mean, they had a couple songs released, a couple music videos, maybe a couple lineup changes, ? And then I feel like for 7 years, we didn't hear a peep out of them. Nothing. And then 7 years later, they finally could be like, yeah, we disbanded, but we couldn't tell you anything. We weren't allowed to tell you anything, like contractually. And that's just from what I remember. Maybe there's a bit more nuance to it, but sometimes groups literally can't tell you anything. These days, I feel like the company will be like, okay, the group's gonna disband. So with that in mind, we're going to release an album. We're going to go on tour one last time. Like, they kind of try to milk it. I feel like back then, you just wouldn't hear anything from the idols until their contracts ended and they were free to talk about it. One of the comments says showbiz in general. Yeah, I got the curves of the Barbie anatomy. And y'all bitches met. That's going to be stuck in my head now. But as we've been progressing along this conversation, of course, we've been talking about Nugu groups. How Nugu groups don't stand a chance if they're not part of the big four. And I don't know how small groups survived back then. I feel like there's this narrative going around that, back then there were a lot more casual listeners and people liked a little bit more of everything and less so company stands. I don't know how true that is. Because again, like I mentioned, one of my favorite groups, Chocolat, literally just disappeared out of thin air and turns out they disbanded. They couldn't say anything. I feel like that was more of like common practice. You just didn't know that these groups disbanded. They kind of just disappeared into thin air. But now, like with more pressure from social media, companies are like a little bit more honest about their disbandments. I mean, I feel like they kind of have to be. I mean, especially if they want to squeeze out a little bit more money from the group before they kind of throw them away. You know what I mean? But oh my God, I completely forgot to explain to you what Nugu even means because I feel there's so many people who don't understand what Nugu means. Some people think that Nugu means new group. And in theory, that actually makes so much sense. New group. Love the vision, but actually Nugu is the word for who in Korean. Nugu, who? So yeah, it's the word for who in Korean. Like, who are you? 누구세요? So by calling a group a Nugu group, you're essentially saying nobody knows them. And as insulting as that sounds, it's kind of become a very endearing term. And from there, the vocabulary surrounding it has taken on a life of its own. You'll hear the Nuguist of Nugus, Nugudom, so on and so forth. But I do have another post to share with you. Why it's hard for Nugu groups to survive nowadays. 13 or 15 years ago, I think it's more easier for Nugu groups to survive in second gen, third gen, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not into K-pop scenes as much as before, but can somebody tell me why nowadays it's hard for Nugu idol groups to survive? Is it because the oversaturation in the K-pop industry, or is it because big companies keep debuting Nugu groups? I appreciate all insights and thoughts. So let's see. COVID happens and pretty much all the television variety programs kind of shut down for a while, and companies realize that they can just do their own variety content online. This leads to a lot less cross-group interaction and a lot less exposure for smaller companies, for smaller groups to gain public recognition. I didn't think of that. And despite the fact that I actually mentioned it earlier in the video, like, you can take so much into your own hands these days, but I didn't consider how cross-group promotion could really help a group. This disproportionately affects small groups and strengthens big groups' already massive fandom and cut off one huge source of exposure. Back in second and third gen, shows like Running Man, Star Golden Bell, Invincible Youth, Heroes, and regardless of how fans perceived it, We Got Married all contribute largely to Idol's popularity. You'll find a lot of smaller Idol where people don't even know their songs but are very familiar with them from variety shows. Weekly Idol with Donnie and Connie also helps so many small idols get the recognition. That honestly makes so much sense. The fall of K-pop will because V-Live died. Oh my god, V-Live. I haven't heard of that in so long. Nugu groups before was really Nugu. Nugu groups today can do world tours. I mean, I think second, third gen Nugus have it worse. The number of smaller companies who have decent sales activities in fourth gen is higher. Not the thumbs up again. CFs are not concentrated to big companies anymore. I just saw some girl group who landed a Korean CF even though I do not even realize they exist. Groups can sell 50 to 200k from smaller companies and go on small tours of 1k capacity these days. Something you barely see back then. That's honestly so true, because even like big K-pop groups back then, when they went on world tours, it was literally LA, for whatever reason, Paris, and of course countries in Asia. That was the world tour. These days, you could have really small companies going all across the world to super small venues. Like Purple Kiss. Purple Kiss went to so many random places in Canada. Places, I've heard of the places obviously, but places that I've never seen any K-pop idols go to before. And now of course, they're literally disbanding and doing like a disbandment tour. Isn't that wild? You're highly mistaken. Nugu groups in second and third gens barely survived and disbanded very easily, whereas you have Nugu groups like X-Love nowadays who are able to survive and do well just based off international fan base. Okay. Oh, this point. As everyone else has said and what I wanted to say, I will also add an extra point. I think another factor is that groups are lasting longer. That means they hold their popularity ring for longer, which means there are also less fans to go around. Those fans of older groups aren't going to suddenly drop them if they are still active. I never thought I would switch groups, but I did. One main factor was the fact they slowed down in promos and someone else ended up getting my attention. That was a point I definitely wanted to bring up as well. Groups are definitely lasting a lot longer. There was always this 7-year curse thing, and I think it's still a thing. It's still a thing. You know, contracts tend to be 7 years long, and the 7-year curse, we've all heard of it before. If you haven't, it's because contracts are 7 years. But these days, I feel like we're seeing way more renewals than we would have 10-15 years ago. Twice renewed, so-and-so renewed, so-and-so renewed. Everybody's renewing with their companies. Even disbanded groups are coming back. I mean, 21, messy story, but like even they came back. Like people are like super into the nostalgia of it all. So I think that definitely speaks to the longevity of things these days. I got the curves at the Barbie anatomy. And y'all bitches mad at me. Okay, this comment is interesting. Previously, the main way to consume K-pop is from music shows and variety shows. Nugu groups can put out an absolute bop and people watching the shows will check them out. Now it's about who has the best exposure, best hype, best promo. You have groups that are famous even before they release their songs on the platform. This isn't to shade any group, but one recent example is Cordis. Their song Go was all over my TikTok, and when I went to search the song, isn't even on Spotify yet. They already had tons of promo for a song that isn't even released. Another one is All Day Project. Literally, they can go make a song singing about ABC and it'll be a hit because the group was already famous from the start. Nowadays, people don't check out new groups. Even Nugu. I get where people get the Nugu from because new groups, Nugu. I get it. Anyways, even survival show groups are struggling. Very rare you get those viral moments. Most recently, Daeun, yes, she is not a new group, but she is a new soloist, getting viral purely from her energetic performances from music shows. Also, idols don't go on reality TV shows as much as before. They instead make their own shows. Yes. So with that, I do have one last post that we can read. This person says that the death of positions in groups is why Nugu groups are flopping. I do feel like positions have died in K-pop. Have they? Because like even Cat's Eye, they have their visual member who's not confirmed, but like fans assigned it to them. They have the leader of the group, you know. But I feel like I haven't heard main vocal. What's the other one? Not sub vocal, because there's main vocal versus lead vocal. I feel like we're hearing less and less of those terms. In order for a group to be successful in debut, companies need to prioritize solo stands. That way they can fight over who's the best member and bulk buy albums to prove their favorites are successful. Notice how companies are selling individual member versions for this very reason. And what's the easiest way to do that? Positions. Every group needs that member who everyone thinks as the rapper, the center, the main vocal. Without this, groups are destined to flop or stay at mid-tier level. This is very interesting so far. All these 5th gen groups lack roles and they all sing in harmonies. That's why they're stuck at the mid-tier levels. Close your eyes, Hearts to Hearts rescene. Due to this, a lot of people are not really interested in them. And at best, they're going to stay at mid-level. Even if their album sales are good now, over time, if they don't release decent music, at best, they won't be like their seniors. Compared to their seniors, Stray Kids, IVE, aespa, we all know who the center is, even if they don't say it. They push one member to have the most rap lines, they push a member to have the most vocals, and that's why they stand out. I do want to say really quickly, before we continue the rest of this, yes, that's definitely a thing to do, like push one member specifically, but then we do see the backlash that gets. But is that backlash worth it, or does it end up not being that great? If we think of Everglow, a lot of people said that Mia was pushed to the center too much. Mia favoritism this, Mia favoritism that. Companies need to allow fans to project and argue. I love that. This member is the main vocal. She deserves lines. I'm gonna buy her version of the album because she deserves better. Companies are not pushing favoritism, and that's why groups nowadays are mid-tier level. Also, one member should always be blonde. I love this. This is so funny. I feel like somebody will look at that and be like, that's ridiculous. But that 10,000% is a conversation companies are having. Should we push this member more? Should we engage this fan war a little bit more? Okay, first comment. This argument doesn't even make sense. Since when are Nugu groups considered successful? Also, Nugu groups have been around since 1st or 2nd gen. To say they aren't popular because of positions isn't true, nor it means anything. I would say rather than all Nugu groups flopping, it's more like the market saturation makes it more difficult for newer acts to emerge. It's not because of toxic fan dynamics. In fact, toxicity is more of a deterrent. The lack of refreshing concepts, music, and dynamic choreography is why groups aren't as prominent. They're lacking the pop culture impact their predecessors had. It's this comment. It sounds like you just thrive on the toxicity of arguing with others. I'm like, has this person never been on Twitter? I mean, that's what fuels K-pop Twitter. There are a whole lot of people who love music, support their bias in healthy ways, like buying the album with their pick, but recognize that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This isn't really a harsh opinion, just a bad take. You can be active in a fandom without being weird about it. Maybe this isn't actually a good move. I get where this person is coming from. I don't think the person is saying, I want to fight about idols. I think they're just looking at the K-pop landscape, and the K-pop landscape is like, you can't sit there and tell me that K-pop stans aren't known for being toxic. I mean, that's kind of a thing. So I think they're just looking at the K-pop landscape and making super professional observations like a company would. Have you guys not seen Hybe's files? I actually don't remember what was in Hybe's files. Don't come at me. I just know I wasn't in them and was heavily disappointed about that. No, but I mean, companies are obviously looking at this stuff. Companies are looking at other companies. Companies are looking at other groups. Companies are looking at what is most profitable to them. And I think if fan wars were more profitable, then that's the direction they're going to go. I have no doubt about that. But yeah, that is basically it for our topic of today. So of course, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.